Don Mattingly enters 1,985 as the technical face of the New York Yankees and the most complete hitter in the league, producing a 324 average, 35 home runs, and 145 RBI on his way to the MVP award. His strikeout rate stays low, his contact rate leads the American League, and opposing pitchers adjust game plans because he punishes mistakes to every field. The Yankees' offense orbits around his presence in the middle of the lineup because his ability to drive in runs stabilizes an otherwise inconsistent roster. Mattingly's swing mechanics look repeatable and durable in 1986 as he posts another elite season, so projection models and front office expectations assume he can sustain this production deep into his early 30s. In spring training of 1,987, however, a back injury described at the time as a disc issue alters his ability to rotate through the zone with the same torque, and therefore, his power output declines immediately. Medical guidance in that era emphasizes pain tolerance and conservative rest, so treatment lags behind modern spine care standards and his recovery window narrows. By 1989, his OPS plus sits at 113 after multiple seasons above 160, meaning his offensive value drops from perennial MVP candidate to above-average contributor almost overnight. Meanwhile, the Yankees remain stuck in their championship drought, and Mattingly shoulders expectations that no longer match his physical capability. Fans still chant his name. But the bat speed tells the truth. Even as he retains the clubhouse captaincy and remains a respected defensive first baseman, Mattingly's offensive cliff reshapes the franchise's trajectory because New York must eventually pivot toward new stars like Derek Jeter to return to contention. The sudden decline underscores how a single injury can erase elite production in a league where rotation mechanics and bat speed define longevity. Still the captain, but the bat never returned, becomes a shorthand among fans for a career that peaks early and fades despite elite discipline and baseball intelligence. What happens when Dwight Gooden, another New York phenom, hits his own unexpected decline curve? Dwight Gooden, the New York Mets ace and centerpiece of the franchise's 1,982nd rotation, posts one of the most dominant pitching seasons in modern baseball history in 1985. Finishing 24-4 with a 1.53 ERA and 268 strikeouts at age 20. His fastball touches the mid-90 seconds, his curveball records extreme vertical break for the era, and his command reduces walk rates to elite levels, so opponents hit just 198 against him. The Mets leverage his efficiency because he completes 16 games and averages more than 8 innings per start, reducing bullpen exposure and enabling a 98-win campaign. Analysts at the time project a decade of Cy Young contention because his strikeout-to-walk ratio and workload at such a young age signal rare talent and durability. However, by 1987, Gooden receives a suspension for cocaine use, and that disruption changes not only his availability, but also his training rhythm and recovery routines. The Mets tighten internal monitoring and encourage treatment, but the era's understanding of addiction and athlete support remains limited, so he returns without a firm long-term plan to sustain performance. As velocity decreases and mechanical consistency waves, his ERA widens by more than 3 runs by 1990, climbing into the mid-4s as hitters adjust to reduced life on the fastball and less depth on the curve. Meanwhile, whispers circulate in 1993 that his arm shows early signs of burnout, as his 4.08 ERA reflects diminished swing and miss rates and a higher contact profile. Raw talent remains visible, but execution no longer matches the early peak. Because baseball rewards repeatability and health across long seasons, Gooden's early workload, off-field issues, and the pressure of carrying a championship-caliber roster combine to accelerate decline. Meteor to mortal fast becomes a shorthand evaluation among fans and analysts, not as a dismissal, but as an acknowledgement that sustained dominance at that level requires stability that he never fully recovers. His story highlights how off-field factors and physical wear intersect to alter even the most promising trajectories. What happens when Johan Santana, another ace with Hall of Fame pace, meets a sudden and irreversible turning point? Johan Santana, the Minnesota Twins ace and later the New York Mets' rotation anchor, establishes himself as the most efficient starting pitcher of the mid-2000s by winning Cy Young Awards in 2004 and 2006, while leading the league in strikeouts, WHIP, and ERA metrics during multiple seasons. Across that prime stretch, he posts a 2.92 ERA from 2004 through 2008, limits walks to one of the lowest rates among high-volume strikeout arms, and maintains durability by averaging more than 220 innings per season. Because his changeup generates extreme swings and misses and weak contact, analysts model his sustainability on precision rather than pure velocity, and front offices consider him a long-term rotation cornerstone. The Mets acquire him in 2008, expecting a sustained ace window, and his 2.53 ERA that year validates that projection. However, on the 1st of June 2012, Santana throws the first no-hitter in Mets franchise history, requiring 134 pitches far beyond typical modern usage guidance, and the outing becomes the structural turning point in his career. In the weeks following the milestone, his velocity declines. His command tightens less sharply at the bottom of the zone and reports surface of shoulder discomfort, which medical evaluations later identify as a torn anterior capsule. That specific injury historically carries a low return to form rate for pitchers because it undermines internal shoulder stability, therefore limiting both velocity and pitch shape consistency. Although the Mets implement rest and rehabilitation, physiology wins. Santana never pitches again in Major League Baseball, the no-hitter celebrated for decades, but costly in real time. Because his decline arrives suddenly, rather than through gradual deterioration, his case becomes a reference point in pitcher usage debates and pitch count policy across the league. Analysts point to the 134-pitch workload and the immediate drop in performance as evidence that peak outings can accelerate structural injury risk, therefore influencing modern load management philosophies. One magical night, one devastating cost becomes shorthand for the dual nature of achievement and risk in professional pitching. So what happens when another elite slugger, Albert Belle, experiences a similarly abrupt collapse, driven not by mechanics or approach, but by the limits of the human body? Albert Belle, the Cleveland Indians' middle-of-the-order force during the 1,990 seconds, establishes himself as one of the most productive power hitters in the league by recording 50 home runs in 1995 and driving in 152 runs in 1998. His isolated power ranks at the top of the American League across multiple seasons. His strikeout rate remains manageable for a slugger of his era, and his OPS plus consistently sits well above 140, meaning he performs at an elite level relative to league context. Because he pairs power contact with aggressive plate discipline and durability, playing every game in 1998, front offices project extended prime performance well into his mid-30s. Teams structure lineups around him, and opponents design pitching plans to avoid middle zone misses, knowing he punishes velocity and mistakes to all fields. However, by 2000, medical evaluations identified degenerative hip issues that impair his rotational force and mobility, and the condition worsens despite treatment, therefore reducing his bat speed and limiting his ability to sustain a violent swing plane. Even in his final full season, he still records 37 home runs, demonstrating that raw power remains intact, but underlying biomechanics deteriorate to the point where long-term performance becomes medically unrealistic. Because the injury type directly affects pivot strength and follow-through, the risk profile shifts quickly from manageable discomfort to structural decline, and Baltimore shuts him down rather than risk chronic damage. Observers describe the retirement at age 33 as sudden, since his statistical production provides no early season signal of collapse. Belle's exit underscores how elite hitters can lose careers not through diminished skills or approach flaws, but through irreversible physical constraints that data cannot always predict. Anger stayed, power didn't, becomes a shorthand commentary in retrospectives, highlighting the disconnect between his still threatening competitive presence and his rapidly declining physical capacity. Because his decline arrives without the gradual erosion that typically signals age-related downturns, the league reassesses medical forecasting and injury risk modeling for power hitters with high-torque swings. What happens when David Wright, another cornerstone player expected to age gracefully, confronts his own sudden physical limitation that rewrites a franchise timeline? David Wright, the New York Mets captain and franchise cornerstone, reaches 2013 with a 309 career batting average, 6 All-Star selections, and peak on-base and slugging metrics that place him among the most productive third basemen of his era. Because he pairs contact quality with disciplined zone recognition, pitchers avoid middle-end fastballs and shift toward breaking pitches away, yet he continues to generate extra base power and above-average walk rates. Wright signs a long-term extension before the 2013 season because the organization projects aging, stability, supported by strong plate approach, reliable defense, and leadership value. At that point, New York's roster construction and fan expectations center on his presence. therefore tying the franchise identity to his health and consistency. In 2015, medical evaluation confirms spinal stenosis, a degenerative condition that restricts nerve pathways and reduces physical tolerance for rotational and axial loading, and the diagnosis immediately changes his career arc. Treatment protocols emphasize rest, controlled movement patterns, and core stabilization rather than aggressive athletic development, so his recovery windows expand while his availability contracts. Over his final 4 seasons, he appears in only 75 total games, and his bat speed, reaction time, and mobility all decline because the condition affects both pain management and neuromuscular output. Meanwhile, the Mets reached the 2015 World Series, and although Wright contributes in that run, his diminished availability shifts leadership burdens to emerging players. Fans still chant captain, but the lineup card tells the broader truth. As he transitions to a limited role, Wright's final appearances become ceremonial, culminating in a single-game return in 2018 that symbolizes both loyalty and loss for the fan base. His downturn illustrates how neurological and structural constraints can end a career even when hitting discipline, baseball IQ, and leadership remain fully intact. The franchise fades with the pain, reflects not only personal decline, but also the way a team must recalibrate when its long-term anchor cannot physically continue. What happens when Ryan Howard, another cornerstone whose offensive identity depends on power and lower body drive, experiences his own rapid descent triggered by one catastrophic moment? Ryan Howard, the Philadelphia Phillies' primary power source and 2006 National League MVP, becomes the most feared left-handed slugger of his era by hitting 58 home runs and driving in 149 runs during that award-winning season. Across the next half-decade, he maintains an OPS above 850, anchors the middle of a lineup that reaches the postseason in 5 straight years from 2007 to 2011, and posts multiple 130-plus RBI seasons because his swing path punishes elevated fastballs and mistakes over the plate. Philadelphia structures its offense around his ability to change game states with single swings, and pitchers respond by shifting pitch selection toward breaking balls away. Yet Howard continues to produce elite run creation rates thanks to raw power and leverage in key moments. The Phillies' World Series title in 2008 reinforces his status as a franchise engine, and his contract extension reflects long-term expectations for continued middle-order production. On the 7th of October 2011, during the final out of the National League Division Series, Howard tears his Achilles tendon while running out a ground ball, and that single play becomes the defining turning point of his career. Recovery from Achilles rupture requires long rehabilitation cycles and drastically reduces lower body drive, which explains why his post-injury mechanics show reduced torque and diminished bat speed in 2012 and beyond. Meanwhile, league-wide defensive shifts, legal under existing rules, specifically target his pull tendencies, and his batting average against shifted infields plummets because his mobility limitations reduce his ability to adjust approach. By 2014, his OPS falls below 700. His strikeout rate climbs above 30%, and opposing pitchers force him to chase pitches below the zone that he once punished with loft and extension. Because his decline coincides with analytical advances emphasizing contact quality and platoon efficiency, front office evaluations turn quickly, and Howard transitions from lineup centerpiece to bench question mark within 3 seasons. From unstoppable to unplayable overnight becomes the shorthand narrative for his downturn. Although the underlying data points to injury-driven mechanical loss compounded by tactical adaptation across the league, his fall illustrates how a single injury can intersect with evolving defensive strategies and pitch sequencing trends to erase previously bankable production. What happens when Chris Davis, another first base slugger with elite peak power, experiences his own rapid statistical collapse triggered by confidence, erosion, and league-wide adjustments? Chris Davis, the Baltimore Orioles' towering first baseman and league-leading power hitter in 2013, reaches peak production by hitting 53 home runs and posting a 634 slugging percentage, which positions him as the most dangerous left-handed power bat in baseball that season. His strikeout rate already trends high during the peak years, yet the power-to-contact ratio remains efficient enough to justify aggressive swing decisions, and Baltimore invests in his production with a 7-year, $161 million contract ahead of 2016. At that time, the league's offensive models project continued 30-plus home run output because his barrel efficiency and loft play matched Camden Yards dimensions. and his left-handed power benefits from division parks in the AL East. Meanwhile, his defensive versatility at first base and occasional outfield usage provide roster flexibility, reinforcing assumptions that his value can hold across multiple seasons. However, as velocity across MLB rises to record levels beginning in 2016, Davis's swing path and timing window narrow, and contact rates drop sharply, initiating a multi-season collapse that becomes historically steep. In 2018, he records a 168 batting average, the lowest in MLB among qualified hitters, and his strikeout rate surges while his chase rate widens because pitchers exploit elevated fastballs and off-speed pitches below the zone. The downturn accelerates in 2019 when he endures an 0-for-5-4 streak, the longest hitless run by any position player on record, and Camden Yards crowds shift from anticipation to audible frustration as strikeouts and weak contact become the norm. Coaching staffs adjust approaches, but mechanical tweaks fail to restore timing or power, and performance tracking data indicates declining bat speed and reduced plate coverage efficiency. By the time Baltimore transitions into a rebuild, Davis becomes a seldom-used contract, more symbolic presence than game-day contributor, and ultimately steps away as performance and opportunity converge toward retirement. From Crush Davis to Crush Confidence summarizes the narrative, yet the underlying metrics point to a broader structural shift in MLB pitching power and tactical evolution that expose vulnerability in high-leverage swing profiles. His fall illustrates how hard-hit potential can quickly become irrelevant when contact reliability breaks, especially in an era defined by velocity and pitch design precision. What happens when Josh Hamilton, another elite talent shaped by explosive production and external pressures, encounters his own precipitous downturn, driven by health, life circumstances, and rapid performance decline? Josh Hamilton, the Texas Rangers' dynamic outfielder and 2010 American League MVP, reaches his peak by hitting .359 with 32 home runs and 100 RBI while leading MLB in OPS and slugging. His contact quality ranks among the league's highest, and advanced metrics from that period show one of the best run creation profiles in baseball, supported by elite bat speed and exceptional pull-side power. Because Hamilton pairs that production with plus outfield defense and base running value, Texas builds its lineup around him during consecutive World Series runs in 2010 and 2011, and his market value accelerates accordingly. The Angels commit a major free agent investment in December 2012 based on projected sustained star production, believing his late career development curve and athleticism will hold. However, injury frequency increases immediately after his move to Anaheim, including thumb and shoulder issues that reduce plate appearances and weaken his ability to turn on inside velocity. Simultaneously, public reports of relapse into substance issues resurface, and the league's support structures still developing toward comprehensive mental health frameworks struggle to stabilize long-term consistency. By 2015, his OPS declines below by 780, and statistical markers such as chase rate, whiff rate, and exit velocity averages trend downward, indicating fundamental erosion in both swing decisions and physical explosiveness. Meanwhile, the Angels elect to offload his contract and absorb roughly $68 million to move on, reflecting how sharply organizational confidence shifts when both availability and output decline. Because his fall combines physical regression and off-field struggle, Hamilton's case becomes a study in how fragile elite production can be when external factors intersect with injury cycles. Talent Divine, Demons Louder is not simply a narrative line. It captures the tension between peak ability and the structural support required to sustain it in a demanding competitive environment. His decline forces front offices to reconsider risk modeling for late breakout players with complex personal histories, especially in long-term deals. What happens when Buster Posey, another cornerstone player touched by a single catastrophic moment, briefly faces the threat of an early cliff before rule changes and recovery reshape his arc? Christian Yelich, the Milwaukee Brewers' premier outfielder during 2018 and 2019, reaches a sustained MVP-level peak by hitting .327 across those two seasons, while producing 80 home runs, ranking first in OPS in 2019, and driving Milwaukee to consecutive postseason appearances. Because his offensive profile blends elite barrel rate, top-tier sprint speed, and disciplined swing decisions, he dominates both contact quality and on-base metrics, forcing pitchers to change sequencing patterns by avoiding middle-end fastballs and elevating breaking balls in two-strike counts. Milwaukee extends his contract based on expected long-term stability, projecting his combination of power, patience, and athleticism to age favorably, especially with his low chase rate and rising fly ball percentage. Entering September 2019, his WAR trajectory aligns with Hall of Fame comparables, and the Brewers' roster strategy centralizes around his presence as a middle-order catalyst. On the 10th of September 2019, Yelich fractures his kneecap on a foul ball, and although the injury does not require surgery, recovery alters mechanics tied to hip drive, ground force generation, and rotational sequencing. In 2020 and 2021, his OPS plus falls near league average around 100. And data tracking shows elevated ground ball rates and reduced average exit velocity, indicating diminished lift and power transfer through the lower body. Because pitchers respond by attacking the zone more aggressively, his walk rate remains high, but slugging percentage declines sharply, shifting his profile from power speed threat to on-base dependent table setter. Meanwhile, swing plane analysis highlights subtle changes in attack angle and timing, and Milwaukee adjusts lineup expectations to reflect a player no longer producing elite run creation value. As trends continue, front office analysts debate whether the decline stems primarily from biomechanics, confidence, or pitcher adaptation, and the team modifies his workload to manage long season durability. MVP to mystery in one swing captures not only the abrupt statistical shift, but also the uncertainty surrounding recovery timelines, ceiling recalibration, and whether power production can return without full, lower body explosiveness. His case illustrates how modern injury data and swing path understanding still cannot fully predict post-injury outcomes for high-efficiency hitters. What happens when Cody Bellinger, another MVP with athletic explosiveness and elite bat speed, experiences his own sudden performance dip tied to a single injury event and mechanical disruption? Cody Bellinger, the Los Angeles Dodgers center fielder and 2019 National League MVP, reaches the apex of modern two-way outfield performance by hitting 47 home runs, recording a 1.035 OPS, and pairing elite defense with advanced base running value. His strikeout rate declines during the MVP season as his swing path tightens and high-speed camera data shows consistent barrel accuracy against both four-seamers and breaking pitches. Because he can punish velocity up in the zone and drive off-speed pitches the other way, opposing staffs alter sequencing patterns mid-season, yet he still posts a 7+ WAR campaign. The Dodgers model him as a franchise anchor, projecting sustained production through age 25 because both athleticism and contact quality grade at an elite tier. In October 2020, during the National League Championship Series, Bellinger dislocates his shoulder on a celebration after a decisive home run, and the injury affects his ability to create torque through the front side of his swing. When he returns in 2021, his average collapses to 165 and his OPS drops below 550, reflecting significant timing disruption and reduced bat speed as lower body drive and shoulder mobility fail to sync. Mechanical analysis shows constant adjustments, bat angle changes, load time experimentation, and lower hand pressure modifications, but none restore the explosive bat plane that defined his MVP campaign. Meanwhile, pitchers exploit his difficulty handling elevated fastballs and inside breaking balls, and the Dodgers reduce his playing time because his contact quality ranks among the league's lowest. Because the decline arrives rapidly and coincides with visible biomechanical compensation patterns, analysts frame his case as an example of how even minor appearing injuries can disrupt kinetic sequencing for modern power hitters. One wrong pop and the swing never recovered becomes a reference line as the Dodgers shift toward platoon usage and eventually move on. His downturn fuels broader league discussion around celebration-related injuries, swing path fragility, and the balance between explosiveness and stability in modern hitting development. What happens when Tim Lincecum, another early career superstar, defined by unique mechanics and elite peak production, sees his own performance cliff arrive just as suddenly, this time from velocity loss instead of structural trauma?